I hope you're all doing well today, and before we begin, let me invite you to subscribe if you enjoy thoughtful, reflective stories like this one. Some moments on television don't arrive with drama or spectacle, but with a quiet emotional weight that settles in slowly. This was one of those moments. Viewers tuning into live recently sensed something different, not because of a big announcement, but because of a shift in tone. Kelly Ripa, someone who has been part of people's daily routines for decades, spoke with a softness and vulnerability that felt deeply personal. Her voice wavered, her eyes filled, and suddenly, it wasn't just another morning show. It felt like someone pausing long enough to acknowledge change, time, and the emotions that come with standing at the edge of a new season in life. Why Kelly Ripa feels like family. For more than 20 years, Kelly Ripa has been a steady presence in American homes. Viewers watched her grow from a younger co-host beside Regis Philbin into a confident, seasoned broadcaster who carried the show through generations. She shared stories about parenting, marriage, aging, and everyday frustrations in a way that felt relatable rather than rehearsed. For many people now in their 60s and beyond, Kelly's face became as familiar as a neighbor's, someone you greeted each morning with coffee. That consistency built trust. She wasn't just hosting a show, she was sharing life alongside her audience, and that's why even a subtle emotional shift felt meaningful. The morning that felt different. On the surface, everything looked the same that morning. The lights were bright, the set unchanged, and the rhythm of the show intact, but Kelly's energy told a quieter story. She moved more slowly, chose her words more carefully, and allowed pauses that television usually avoids. Viewers noticed immediately. It felt as though she was carrying something unspoken, something thoughtful rather than alarming. The studio itself seemed to reflect that mood, calmer, more attentive, less rushed. It wasn't scripted, and that's what made it powerful. Emotion without performance. When Kelly's eyes welled with tears, it didn't feel theatrical. She didn't rush to recover or turn the moment into humor, which is something she's always been skilled at doing. Instead, she let the emotion exist. That choice mattered. It signaled honesty rather than spectacle. She spoke about gratitude, about time passing faster than expected, and about how life shifts whether we're ready or not. There was no dramatic declaration, only reflection. For viewers, that restraint made the moment feel sincere, like someone sharing a truth rather than delivering a headline. More than a television role. Kelly's appeal has never been about perfection. She has always allowed space for messiness, growth, and self-awareness. That authenticity is why viewers felt connected to her for so long. When she spoke with emotion, it wasn't about leaving a job, but about acknowledging the weight of carrying a role for decades. Morning television requires energy, optimism, and consistency, even on days when life behind the scenes is complicated. Kelly's willingness to acknowledge that reality reminded viewers that even familiar faces are human first. Setting the script aside. At one point, Kelly clearly stepped away from prepared remarks and spoke directly from the heart. She talked about uncertainty, about how change can be both necessary and frightening, especially when you've spent years building something meaningful. Her words resonated with anyone who has ever faced retirement, a career shift, or a redefinition of identity. She didn't present answers or resolutions. She simply acknowledged the question, what happens when who you've been for so long no longer fits the life you're living? A reflection for an older audience. Much of Kelly's audience is now in their 60s and 70s, a stage of life where reflection becomes unavoidable. Careers wind down, routines change, and identities tied to productivity and responsibility begin to shift. Watching Kelly speak so openly validated those emotions. Her tears weren't just about herself, they mirrored the feelings of viewers who have quietly wondered what comes next after decades of structure. In that sense, the moment became shared, not singular. Family as a guiding force. Kelly spoke warmly about her family, about how priorities evolve over time. She acknowledged that what once felt essential begins to change as life moves forward. For many viewers, that sentiment rang deeply true. At a certain stage, success becomes less about titles and schedules and more about presence, relationships, and time spent meaningfully. Her words reflected a shift that many people experience but don't always articulate. Time is precious. One simple line stayed with viewers long after the episode ended. Kelly said that time's precious and that she didn't want to waste it. It wasn't advice or instruction, just a truth spoken aloud. That sentence landed because it felt earned. Everyone knows time matters, but hearing it from someone who has spent decades living by a demanding schedule gave it weight. It prompted quiet reflection rather than urgency. The courage to acknowledge change. Kelly admitted that speaking honestly wasn't easy. Fear, she said, can keep people silent, afraid of disappointing others or letting go of something familiar. But sometimes, she acknowledged, the bravest thing you can do is admit when you are ready for something different, even if you don't yet know what that looks like. That message resonated with viewers holding onto routines or roles out of obligation rather than fulfillment. Why vulnerability matters. Seeing someone so accomplished allow herself to be uncertain was comforting. It challenged the idea that confidence means certainty. Instead, Kelly modeled a quieter strength, the willingness to be honest without having all the answers. For viewers navigating their own transitions, her vulnerability normalized feelings of doubt, sadness, and hope all at once. A shared emotional pause. What made the moment unforgettable wasn't just Kelly's emotion, but the way the audience experienced it together. Millions of people paused simultaneously, reflecting on their own lives. It became one of those rare television moments that transcends entertainment and becomes a shared emotional experience, not because of shock, but because of recognition. Mark Consuelos' quiet presence beside Kelly sat Mark Consuelos, not just as a co-host, but as her partner. His response was understated and powerful. He didn't rush to fill the silence or redirect the conversation. He simply reached for her hand and listened. When he spoke, his words carried pride and respect, reinforcing that whatever changes lay ahead, Kelly was supported and grounded in love. Love as the foundation. That brief exchange between Kelly and Mark reframed the moment. It reminded viewers that behind the cameras is a real marriage built on partnership and understanding. His presence turned reflection into reassurance. It showed that transitions don't have to be faced alone and that love can provide stability even when routines change. The online response. After the episode aired, the reaction online was immediate and heartfelt. Rather than speculation or outrage, the response was filled with gratitude. Viewers shared how deeply the moment resonated with them and reflected on their own lives. The conversation shifted from television to humanity. Stories from viewers' people wrote about retiring after decades of work, about struggling to redefine themselves, about realizing they had postponed joy for too long. Kelly's words gave them permission to reflect without shame. These weren't celebrity reactions, they were life reactions, and they revealed the real impact of her honesty. Redefining identity. At the core of the moment was a universal question. Who are we when we step away from long-held roles? Kelly didn't pretend to know the answer. She simply acknowledged the question itself, and that acknowledgement was enough to resonate deeply with viewers facing similar uncertainty. A quieter measure of success. Kelly's reflection offered a softer definition of success, one rooted in alignment rather than achievement. It suggested that success can mean choosing what fits the season of life you're in, even if it looks different from what came before. That message felt especially meaningful to an audience that understands how quickly time moves once its value becomes clear. Not an ending, but awareness. It's important to understand that this wasn't a farewell. It was a pause, a moment of honesty in a culture that often rushes past emotion. Kelly didn't announce an ending. She acknowledged evolution, and perhaps that's why it resonated so deeply. What viewers carried forward. Long after the show ended, people continued talking about how it made them feel. Thoughtful, reflective, motivated to reconsider how they spend their time. Kelly didn't tell anyone what to do. She simply modeled what it looks like to listen to yourself honestly. The power of a human moment. In the end, this moment wasn't about television schedules or career changes, it was about humanity. Kelly Ripa didn't just host a show that morning. She held space for millions of people navigating their own